When I look at our history, I realize that our history is not negotiable. It's not defined by slavery. It is a profound history, and we need to teach it in honesty. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Hey, happy Father's Day to all of the fathers out there. And welcome to the Erudition Network Black History and Knowledge session with Eddie K. Phillips. This is a special session. Usually I'm on Saturdays, but I wasn't able to get on yesterday at some technical issues. But I am here tonight. This episode, we're going to talk about Black fathers because it's Father's Day. We're going to talk about fathers in general. I shouldn't just say Black fathers, but we'll get into that. Before we get started, I want to make sure that you subscribe to the Erudition Network, hit the like button, share this live, and put where you're watching from if you join us live in the chat. This is an interactive session, so I do not want you to just be sitting back listening. I want to hear your questions. If you have questions or thoughts on what we're talking about tonight, I want you thinking, I want you answering, I want you questioning, and I want you to be building these ideas and these thoughts with me. Tonight, as I said, we're going to be dealing with fatherhood, Black history, family memory. We'll talk a little bit about Juneteenth because that just passed, civil rights, a little bit of criminality, how those narratives are affecting the Black fatherhood, and historical, political, social systems, a whole polymetric kind of approach to how we do things. I do want to say quickly before we move into the session, it has been a while for me. I've been a little away for a couple of weeks, and I just want to thank all of you all as I have been recovering and reflect on the things that I've been having to go through lately. Some of you know that I have been sick for a couple of months now and had to have surgery, but I am here. I'm ready. I'm back, and I thank God I am still here. I thank God for my wife and my sons because they helped me carry on through this season that has been really, really hard. And that's why this Father's Day is important to me. It hits me a little differently. This year, I was reflecting also, is the anniversary, about the 6th year anniversary of my best friend of him passing. So it's been a lot. But when I think about and talking about fatherhood, it's not from a distance. You know, I'm talking about Black fatherhood as a father of 4 Black sons, as a retired veteran, as a public historian, as a man who has had to look at it in a different way on how you provide, protect, teach, pray, survive. As a father, fatherhood is not just a title. It is more than that. It is memory. It is responsibility. It is sacrifice. And a lot of times, beyond the love, it is also fear. It is the burden of trying to prepare your sons, your children, for a world that does not always see them clearly. And so as I approach the ideas for this particular episode, I was thinking about that. And so before we even get into it, I wanted to kind of touch on it. I want you to understand the unique position that Black fathers particularly, but fathers also generally have to be in. I want you to put your thoughts in chat. I want you to reflect on these things along with me as we go through this. As always, we're teaching Black history. Many people will tell you that they understand history and they teach history, but we are focusing on a history that is not often taught, right? I even in my thoughts in the chat, think about it. When people talk about Black fathers, what do they usually talk about first? Do they talk about their presence? Do they talk about what I talk about with the sacrifice? Do they talk about their work? Do they talk about their prayer life? Do they talk about how they protect them? Do they even mention love? Because what we often see put in the narratives and the media and everything else, we hear absence, crime, dysfunction, and blame. And those things are completely opposite of the things that I just spoke about. So as we go through tonight, I want you to think about all of these things and how these narratives are placed. And we're going to touch on history on how it gets that way. We're going to be factual. We're going to be fair. We're going to be historically grounded. We are not going to excuse those fathers who have failed. We are not going to romanticize anybody. We're not going to lie. But we are also not going to let people take Black fathers, particularly Black families and Black history, and cut them into fragments and translate them as lies. And then take things from those fragments to create a different truth. So if you're here live, if you come on live, get in the chat, make sure you make your comments and your remarks, and let's go. This is the Erudition Network Interactive Black History and Knowledge Session. I'm Eddie Phillips, and tonight we're going to get into this. First thing I want to talk about tonight is what happens to people when the father is discussed more often as a social problem than a historical witness. What happens when Black fatherhood is interpreted through absence, as I said earlier, criminality, instability, pathology, and most often in the American narrative, failure? What happens with that before anyone seriously asks what Black fathers have done, what they carry, how they protect, how they repair, how they survive, how they teach, and how they provide and teach through generations? And what happens when the public story of the Black father is shaped not only by those who aren't even Black fathers or outsiders, and who benefits from that distortion? And why do they choose to benefit from that distortion? What also about the insiders, the Black fathers who align themselves with those distortions and those different ideas, who sell out for money, proximity, ideological comfort, institutional safety? What happens with those people too? Because this is all a part of it, and something that I've been kind of getting into even before I took the break that I did. When you hear public conversations about Black fathers, what do you usually hear first? Do you hear anything, like I said earlier, about love, sacrifice, protection? Or do you usually hear about absence? Most often, do you usually hear about crime, dysfunction, anger, blame? Put one word in that chat, or if you watch this later, put it in the comments and describe the public image that you hear that from America that is attached to Black fatherhood. That's where this conversation has to begin. Not with the assumption that Black fathers are missing, not with the assumption that Black family life is naturally broken, not with the assumption that every measurable wound inside of the Black community aligns itself with the Black father. We have to begin with the older and more difficult question of narrative control, because that's what we deal with. Narrative control refers to the idea to define what a person's story means before that person even gets to explain it themselves. Excuse me. When someone controls the narrative, they do not have to erase every fact. They only have to arrange the facts in a way that makes you look worse than what you are. It makes one group look naturally responsible, and it makes another look completely the opposite. And it produces those conditions through law, labor, violence, economics, back in the day, segregation. This is what's happened repeatedly to Black fatherhood in America. Many older Black men, as I grew up, have been judged through systems that often separated them from the very power that they should have had, then blamed them for not possessing that power. They have been judged through labor markets that restricted their wages, reduced their wages, and then blamed them for not providing for their families. They have been judged through housing systems that confine families in very small places in disadvantaged neighborhoods, then blamed those fathers and families for the conditions inside those neighborhoods. They have been judged through schools that did not always honor or respect a child's minds or questions. Courts that did not always honor their humanity or see them as worthy fathers or parents. What about the medical systems that did not always honor their family's pain or their pain and estranged them so much that many of them now do not go to the doctor because they cannot trust the medical practitioners who are there and have been taught to not trust. And then the media systems that do not always honor them properly, that do not share or show their tenderness, their love, their compassion, as I said earlier. And then after all of that, many public voices still turn around and speak up, even those within our own community, and speak about the Black father as he simply failed at everything. He just simply failed to show up. Even though all of the conditions that I just mentioned that were created. So let me ask you this way. If a man is told to provide, but his wages are restricted, told to protect, but the protection is punished, told to lead by civic power, but that is denied to him, and told to be responsible inside systems that repeatedly steal and destabilize his family. Should we only judge him? Or should we judge the system that is wounding him every day? Should we also study the pressure that shaped where he goes through? That is why that phrase, the forgotten good Black father, it matters when you see it online. It's not a sentimental phrase. It's an analytical correction. Analytical correction, because what has to happen is we can't merely keep taking other people's words for what a Black father is. We're correcting the frame of thought which Black fathers are studied, described, blamed, sometimes mocked, pitied, criminalized. The forgotten Black father is the man who worked jobs that did not make him wealthy, but still made him responsible and took care of his family. He is the man who worked jobs that did not always treat him right. He's the man who may not have had full custody of his children, but he still cared with full concern. He is the man who called, warned, corrected, protected, prayed, transported, paid, listened, taught, and even a lot of times dejected. He is the father who was not always perfect, but who was not always just the stereotype that we hear. This matters. This matters because public narratives count Black fatherhood too narrowly, even in our own community. They count a household, they address it, and they miss the sacrifice that father or even that mother many times had to provide. They count marital status, but miss the memory. They count income, but miss the protection. They count the official records of them not being together, but miss the grandfather, the uncle, the stepfather, the church elder, the coach, the friend, the deacon, the neighbor, the cousin. All those men who took a fathering presence when the family needed that structure. See, none of this means residence. None of this means that they live there. And it doesn't mean that residence doesn't matter. It does matter. Stability matters. A stable home can shape a child deeply, but residence alone does not capture the full moral, emotional, historical, and psychological effects of fatherhood. I want you to think about that. Who fathered you besides your biological father? Who mentored you? Was it a grandfather? Was it an uncle? Was it your older brother? Was it your pastor? Was it your coach? Et cetera, your teacher? Put that relationship in the chat or in the comments, because I'm sure there's someone that was there. If someone helped to father you through bad times, giving you guidance, correction, protection, or even just an example. Because see, one of the mistakes in the Black community is public narratives make it assume that fathering only counts when it fits in a householding category, when a Black man is in the home. And it leaves out that fatherhood is multidimensional. It's multidimensional, meaning a thing has more than one meaningful part. Fatherhood includes engagement. That means direct interaction with the child. It includes accessibility. It includes presence. It includes responsibility. Responsibility means planning, protection, decision-making, caretaking, the sacrifice it takes to take care of your children. It includes economic support. But even if you don't make a lot, it means more emotional regulation, moral guidance that helps to shape our cultural memory, model us as men spiritually and women. It's transmission of identity to understand that you are worth something. I was looking at a study as I was preparing for this. The National Center of Health Statistics made this point in its report on fathers' involvement by noting that multiple indicators are needed to measure fathering. And by identifying engagement, accessibility, responsibility, and economic support as major dimensions, scholars are better understanding father involvement. Why is that? Because for a very long time, we were lied to and told a narrative that was incorrect. Bad analysis becomes dangerous. Bad analysis can go into interpretation, and it can become a real issue. When people lie about the statistics and people change things and they tell you a small part of a narrative, it removes the historical and structural context. And then it presents those fragments as the whole truth, as I said earlier. When people talk about Black fathers only through absence, they commit that exact error. They may take the family structure data, the crime data, the incarceration data, the poverty data, the birth data, but they detach those numbers from the history that shaped them. They detach slavery from the family separation narrative in Black families ancestrally. They detach emancipation from the struggle to reunite families historically. They detach Jim Crow from labor suppression, transportation suppression, as we talked about over the last couple of weeks. They detach redlining from neighborhood instability. They detach mass incarceration from father separation that was done in order to create a new form of slavery. They detach wage inequality from household pressure and how that shapes people not being able to provide in the way they would like to. And then they point back at the family, but particularly the father, and say, see, this is who they are. Have you ever seen somebody use a statistic about Black families without explaining the history behind the statistic? I'm sure you have. It's online all the time. Have you ever seen someone drop a number in an argument online as if that number itself proves Black failure? If you've seen it, put it in the chat, put it in the comments, and just type bad analysis. Because that's what it is. Because a fact without context can still be used to tell a lie. And we see that more and more often today. It's not scholarship. It's arranged memory. It's designed to create an arranged memory or a version of history organized to protect a preferred conclusion or a preferred group. It does not always lie by inventing every detail. It takes something apart. It lies about what it chooses. And in doing that, it focuses on that and the other details disappear. That is why Black fatherhood has to be placed back inside historical memory. Historical memory has to be applied to it so that people can remember, interpret, and transmit those good fathers and the lessons from the bad ones. Because we can't just not include them. It's not only what happened, it transmits the meaning of the past events across generations so that the young, the up and coming, can learn. History for us, Black historical memory, has never been an academic luxury. It has been a survival structure. A survival structure is a pattern, an institution, story, discipline, or relationship that helps a community endure pressure over time. Black families have used churches, family reunions, their service to this country, migration stories. They've gone to barbershops, beauty shops, right, to translate their history, right, to be able to tell their story. These are not just mere cultural institutions and discussions. They were ways to preserve your identity when legal systems and other systems tried to define Black people only as criminals, labor, property, threats, or simply that Black problem. Here is the question. What was one survival structure in your family? Was it your church? Was it your grandparents? Was it the places that you sat at the kitchen table? Was it through Black music? Maybe was it your service to your country because your grandfather, your uncle served, or your father served? Did you learn something through family reunions? Was it your mother or your father who made sure that the family stayed connected in their story, even when life got hard? Because see, in that historical landscape, we have to look at the Black father because he carried a special burden. He was expected to provide under conditions that restricted provision. He was expected to protect under conditions that all of his protections for you were stripped or even sometimes penalized. He was expected to discipline children for a world that would punish those children more harshly than he ever could. He was expected to teach courage without recklessness, restraint without surrender, confidence without making his courage or his child appear threatening or arrogant, to teach them dignity without giving that child a false picture of society that was waiting out there to hurt him. Do you see how hard that assignment is? It asks a man, and sometimes the woman, she's raising him alone, to help his child become more while preparing that child for a world that may see him and his wholeness as something wrong or defiant. It's a sociological, psychological, theological, and historical burden. And he had to do that. This is fatherhood under historical pressure. Remember, historical pressure is the accumulated weight of past systems that's continued to shape the present emotional, social, and economic world. It does not mean that people don't have agency, that they can't decide for themselves. They can make choices, they can take actions, but agency does not operate in an empty space. Agency operates inside of an environment. A father making decisions, using his agency inside stable wealth, safe neighborhoods, and respected institutions, right? He can do those things comfortably because he's not facing the same terrain as a father making decisions under racial suspicion, economic failure, over policing of his children and his overall family, medical distrust we talked about earlier. You're not dealing with any of those things. This is why that forgotten good Black father must be discussed and must be recovered. Why we have to talk about it. Can we tell the truth about fathers who failed without letting that failure become the whole Black fatherhood story? Can we hold men accountable without turning every Black man into symbols of racial defect? Can we admit that the fathers have wounds too, without allowing the pundits and the sellouts and the liars out here to use those wounds as proof that Black families are naturally broken and culturally wicked? Truth and facts allow us to say that Black fathers, like all fathers, include the faithful and the failing, the present and the absent, the healed and the broken, the wise and the foolish. It's just what it is. We need to be more honest with it. We need to be more truthful with it. We should not have selective blame. Selective blame is one of the ways historical memory gets weaponized. Weaponized memory refers to how the use of history, half history, is distorted. And it's used as a tool to control the present narrative and interpretations. We see that all the time now. That's why the forgotten, set aside good father is dangerous to the false narrative. His existence disrupts the story. He proves that public stereotypes were never the truly large part of the story, that he doesn't fall into those. Because, he shows up for the family. He shows up for the family reunions. He shows up for the church services. He takes care of his kids. And every one of us knows a father, a grandfather, an uncle, a stepfather, an elder, someone who falls into that narrative, but we ignore them. We ignore them. And then we're going to get into this later. This is where that sellout alignment matters. Alignment in this framework refers to a way a person, group, institution, or public voice positions itself in relation to power, truth, community, and reward to sell you out and make you look bad. And they're chosen consciously. You see these sellouts everywhere. And they all develop from survival first. And then they become manipulated by fear, ambition, trauma, money, ideology. And their design is to make the whole of Black fatherhood or Black people or Black culture follow the narrative, as I said, the specified selective blame that is placed on us and waylaid on us. Black fatherhood is very important, and it's waylaid on us. It's waylaid on us. And let me tell you something. Fathers from other cultures should not feel excluded from the conversation. They shouldn't. Because let me ask you something. When someone talks about Black fathers, are they trying to understand the father, or are they trying to use the father? Are they trying to heal the family, or are they trying to win an argument against the family? Are they trying to restore Black memory, history, or are they trying to make Black people feel shame through the politics, platforms, and ideology? See, we center the Black father here because the historical attack on Black fatherhood is real. But fatherhood itself is universal. Every culture has fathers. All of them carry memory. Every culture has a father who fails or a father who excels. It's every culture has men who were taught to provide before they were taught to heal. And every culture has children who need more than what those fathers sometimes feel that they can give. But why do we pick out the Black father? Why do we isolate him? Why do we make him out to be the villain? That's the question as we look at things, because we have to understand that this is what this is. Because once we recover the forgotten good Black father as a historical figure, we have to then look at things more specifically. Why did public language become so comfortable confusing the residence of a Black father to fatherhood itself? Why was he isolated in that? How did the location of a father's bed become a line to complete the measurement of his love, his concern, his labor, his teaching, his responsibility? And what happens when a society takes those complicated family realities and flattens it? When you hear the word absent father, what do you think people usually mean? Do they mean that the father does not live in the home? Do they mean that he does not call? Do they mean that he does not provide? Do they mean that he does not care? Or do they sometimes use that word absent father as a complete painting that defines everyone? What kind of absence are they talking about? And why do they specify it for Blacks? Absence sounds simple. It sounds obvious. It sounds measurable. But absence can mean several different things. Physical absence can mean a father is not living in the same household. Emotional absence can mean a father may be physically present but disconnected from the child's emotion and world. And that could be any culture. Economic absence means a father is not contributing materially to his child's life, health, or care. Developmental absence means that a father is not participating in his child's growth, his guidance, his education, his discipline. And then spiritual absence means a father is not helping the child to understand meaning, morality, faith, humility, God. Those distinctions matter. because a father can live outside the home and still be involved. He can call, visit, discipline. He can encourage. He can drive over to transport you. He can teach you. He can provide. He can pray with you. He can warn you of the things he sees in you as a child. He can show up at school. He can attend games. That doesn't mean he's absent because he's not in the home. And we have to be careful of that when we play the race game. Because we can have white, brown, or whatever fathers that are physically in the home and still silent, harsh, detached, distracted, addicted, abusive, emotionally immature, overtly violent to everyone in the home. We can have that. That does not mean residence is not important, but what it shows is that it's not causality. A stable two-parent household can provide structure, continuity, and everything, but it can also provide things that make a child or children hurt. Have you ever known a father who lived outside the home but still showed up? Have you ever known a father who lived inside the home but fell into those things I just said? Emotionally absent, violently abusive. You don't have to give names, but I'm sure we all know people like that. And we need to understand that both can be true. Fathering quality refers to the substance of a father's relationship with a child. It includes how he engages, how he or she, how he listens as a parent. Motherly qualities and fatherly qualities build over into each other because they all do this. But a black father is often seen as not doing it at all. And that's where the public narrative becomes intellectually dishonest. It doesn't tell the truth. It creates a misleading impression. And then you have to ask yourself, for what purpose? And I ask you again, have you ever seen someone use a statistic about black families as if the number itself explained the whole story? Did they explain to you what that number measured? Do they even know who collected those numbers? Did they explain what it did not measure? Did they talk about the outliers? Did they explain the history behind it? No. Most times they throw out a statistic and they are very specific, as I told you earlier. And that's one of the traps that we're talking about tonight in the absent black father narrative. It's a real issue. It's a real thing that we deal with. And it's an issue because many children of every background experience father absence or father disconnect. Doesn't matter the culture, but when it's racialized and the issue is put on blackness itself as the cause, it becomes a severe problem. Racializing an issue takes a social condition and framing it as if it naturally belongs to a racial group. Recently, I saw a lawyer who posted and said, talking about the Kamala Anthony case, that black people, black culture is murderously, culturally they're taught murder. Culturally, they're taught victimization. You're racializing, but this was a black man that did this. So it is what it is with the sellout alignment. But see, once that happens, people stop asking structural questions. They stop asking realistic questions that can actually solve the problem. They stop asking the economic question, the emotional question, the policy question. They simply attach these wounds and accusations to black identity, and then they call that analysis. You see people on the Blaze and other things that are out here online that tell us that our history doesn't even exist, that everything is racialized, that it's all a lie. But that is what they're doing, and they're doing it and calling that analysis. But father absence is not a Black only issue, as I said. Divorce, non-marital status, non-marital births, incarcerations, addictions, all those things fall into all cultures. White fathers are missing too. Latino fathers are missing too. Some are present financially, but absent spiritually, and on and on and on. So why do we racialize the essence of Black fatherhood to explain the criminality that we see? We give it a racial essence, referring to the false idea that we naturally carry these fixed moral, intellectual, cultural, and behavioral traits. We don't know any better. It's a cultural Black family pain. And that's why that narrative is so useful to certain pundits and sellouts. It allows them to appear compassionate while avoiding the deeper accountability that even some of the racist systems should be held accountable for. And they can say they're only talking about family values while quietly removing all of those things: slavery, segregation, Black codes, Jim Crow, and then tell you that they don't exist, that they never exist. Black fathers are not powerless. Black men should avoid ever feeling powerless. Many of us, you revel in your responsibility. Family structure is relevant to you. I have seen Black fathers who are wounded by their abandonment or their perceived abandonment of their children and want to do better and then do better. The pain is real. That absence was real. A failing Black father does not always have to be a continually failing Black father. But see, facts and truth require proportion. You have to put each factor in its proper size in its relationship to other factors. Knowing that those fatherly absences and those things, they matter throughout all cultures, that a father's presence matters. But understand that presence alone cannot overcome every structural barrier. Put it in its proper proportion, in its proper place. Stop telling us that every Black father is absent. Stop telling us that every Black father is criminal and applying racialism and criminality to us. Responsible fatherhood simply refers to a father's active commitment to the well-being, development, protection, and care of their children. And more people actually want that. More fathers, Black fathers, actually do that. And research studies across family studies show that Black fathers are just as much there and just as much absent as everyone else. We don't minimize the fatherhood, but we should not aggrandize these racialized, corrupted, analytical ways in which we look at it. That's why data has to be handled carefully. That's why data has to be chosen and used carefully. This is an important thing for us to understand. And something, as I was coming back to that, I said, man, what do we talk about? The nuances that are out here are done on purpose. We're taught these things to disrespect ourselves, to not see ourselves as real. And the unfortunate part of it is that far too many of us accept it. We accept it. We tell ourselves that this is, in fact, the truth, the fact. I don't have to go into slavery and go deeper in it, because we understand, at least we should, how slavery played into the abandonment and separation of Black families. How it took our wealth, our protection, our status, our protective status, your natural protective status as a father. Whether you're looking through any of the deep South, whether you go through Alabama, Mississippi, Missouri, Georgia, Arkansas, Black men were being held down even after slavery and through Jim Crow, and not being able to provide for their families. I don't have to go to slavery to just show you that. I can go through the convict lease system, the way that the South locked up Black men in order to have them be in a new form of slavery. These are all pressures that we know existed historically, and we can go look through all history, American history, and see it. We just went through Juneteenth. Juneteenth matters in this discussion because fatherhood cannot be separated from freedom. A father cannot fully protect the family if the law does not recognize his authority. A father cannot fully provide if labor is stolen or controlled. So those ideas of slavery are important. And hearing people talk about how Juneteenth wasn't important, I put out two shorts just the other day on Juneteenth to try to talk about that. Juneteenth should not be reduced to a simple story about people finding freedom late. That version is too small. It's not completely useless, but it delays the communication. It's about reinforcement. Let's think about that. Troops came down to reinforce the idea that you were free. Enforcement gives those fathers and those mothers the authority to take their children and to leave. When we talk about Juneteenth and we talk about the idea of Black fathers and families, it means something to have the government back you up in General Order number 3 and say, you can leave. Even though, let's be historically accurate, General Order number 3 told them that they were free, but did not say that they could leave. They wanted them to get that crop done. And I've talked about that before. But legally, they were free. They could take their families. They had ownership of their families. That part we cannot take away from them. Because it's not just a question of labor, it's a question of human standing, personal rights, my ability to have personal relationship with my family, protect my family, control how my family uses its wages, secure marriage with my wife, prevent my children from being sold from us. A right is not just a political idea. A right is a shield around your human life. And for the formerly enslaved, specifically the father, it's a promise of personal rights that made it possible to build my family and my material stability, at least on paper. It could be liberating language, but I always want you to look at the facts and the truth of it. Because even back then, with General Order number 3, as I said, it advised men to remain quietly at their present home and work for their wages, while warning them that they would be allowed to collect at military posts I'm sorry. They could go to some posts, but they could not just go there and do nothing. They couldn't be vagrants. They couldn't be idle. So there was always attention put there for Black fathers. You can't just show up if you're mistreated here. Work through it. We will enforce your freedom, but we need to get this crop. I want to make that distinction because I don't want no pundit coming on here saying, well, he didn't tell you the full truth. I always tell you the factual truth. It's why that Juneteenth idea should be discussed. It gave fathers something that they didn't have. It was incomplete freedom, but it at least gave them marriage recognition, some family protection, some sustainability, some ability to control their narrative. I wanted to touch on that because as we just went through Juneteenth and people tried to blow Juneteenth off, because you have to ask yourself, can a father fully provide if the economic social system is designed to exploit him? Can he fully protect? And so it was a step towards better protection. And a situation that when I hear white pundits talk about, their ancestors never had to live. They never had to live through it. It tells us that responsibility needs conditions where it can actually function. You can't be responsible if the conditions won't allow you. When modern pundits mock Juneteenth or reduce it to a confusion about dates, they're not merely misunderstanding a holiday. They are shrinking the history of an enforcement that was the first step in allowing Black fathers to have some control or protection over their families. It wasn't a fully recognized freedom. It was incomplete, but it was something. See, because once we understand that Juneteenth, that part is more than just a delayed announcement, we can better understand why modern civil rights history is also denied, minimized, mocked, rearranged, told it doesn't exist, and how that all plays into the Black father. You know, many of us have seen someone talk about Black crime, but skip housing history, right? See someone talk about Black poverty, but skip labor discrimination. See someone talk about Black fathers not being there, but skip the laws that prevented them from being there, whether it be from the welfare system or even back in the days of Jim Crow and not allowing them to be real fathers. Fragmentation matters because fragmentation is the breaking apart of connected realities until people can no longer see the whole system. And pundits and people out here do that effectively every day, which is why Black history is not here just for me to teach a culture of Black people. It's to teach everyone, because even some of our white and brown brothers don't realize how Black history affects them also. They don't understand that this history is a lot deeper than just us. They don't understand W.B. Du Bois's idea of the gift of Black folks and the gift that Black people gave. They don't understand the Voting Rights Act of 1965. They don't understand how that was an advantage, not just for Blacks, but for everyone. They don't understand how the Civil Rights Act of 1964 outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. and thus allow people to go away from the quota system that America had established and allow people to come over here. They don't dig deeper enough into public accommodation, labor, schooling, institutional life. They don't understand the sacrifice of Black fathers and Black mothers that got those rights. Those who had to go through obstructive citizenship, where people are legally recognized as citizens, but are prevented, burdened, threatened, killed, or manipulated out of using those rights as citizens. If a father's vote is obstructed, his job options are limited. His housing is restricted. His neighborhood is over-policed. His children's schools are underfunded. His children are over-policed. It simply refuses to understand how this affects the Black father and how that narrative has been used against him through report after report, through lie after lie. Many of you were never taught about the Kerner Commission. Many of us weren't taught enough about the Voting Rights Act. They weren't taught enough about how things work. The National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders, commonly it was referred to as the Kerner Commission, it released a report in 1968 after major uprisings in American cities. The report showed that civil disorder was rooted in Black frustration over lack of economic opportunity, over the restraint of Black fathers and mothers, discriminatory treatment by white society, police misconduct. All of these things that played into it. This was not something that was mentioned in history classes. Not many of you were taught about the Kerner Commission in school. You might have been taught about Dr. King, Rosa Parks, the March on Washington, but the government's own commissions said that America was moving toward two societies, two Americas, and that it was ostracizing and pushing down Black families and pushing Black fathers out of the home. The Kerner Commission report matters because it directly contradicts the lazy ideas that were put out of criminality, of racialized America. But wait a minute. If that be the case, then why do we have pundits out here in our own community? And I want to get into that just over this little short time before we close. Why do we have our own people here who tell lies about this? Because now that we've looked at how civil rights history has been, it gets fragmented. We got to ask a harder question, right? What happens when those fragments are not only repeated by the outsiders, but also carried, taught, and confirmed by people inside our own community? What happens when Black fathers, Black families, Black struggle, Black poverty, Black criminalization, and Black historical pain are explained through narratives created by systems that benefit when Black people remain divided, ashamed, defensive, or disconnected from memory? And what happens when some people align those narratives because the alignment gives them a sense of safety, wealth, status, access, political, institutional, or whatever, audience approval, followers, likes, or simply the feeling of being above the very people who look like them? and that they're actually connected to. This is why I get very angry with the sellout alignment framework and how it works in this country and how we're seeing an increase in it. And why I want to define it carefully, because I'm not using the phrase sellout as a lazy insult. Some people act like I do. I had a friend that said he didn't understand. So I wanted to add this in so we could break that down. I'm not using it as a lazy insult. I'm using it as an analytical category. An analytical category in a way of naming a pattern so we can study it and how it operates. My wife asked me earlier about how people apply logic. That's what you have to do. How does it operate? When I talk about sellout alignments, I'm talking about the way people, groups, institution, media, churches, leaders, academic scholars, commentators, and even everyday people online position themselves in relation to sellout power, truth, community, and reward. Because the alignment means positioning. That's what alignment means. It means where a person places themselves when alignments are conscious. A person knows exactly what they are doing. Some alignments can be unconscious. A person has absorbed the narrative so deeply that they think they are simply being objective. That happens. The ideological idea. But some alignments are strategic. Some are fearful because of survival. Some are profitable. Some are performative. But it all starts at a survival base. Before I go back into the 7 alignments, and I've talked to you all about this before, I want to ask the audience a question. Have you ever heard someone repeat a damaging story about Black people and you could tell they were not really studying the issue? They were repeating something they heard from a pundit. Maybe they were trying to sound smart. Maybe they were trying to sound tough. Maybe they wanted approval from a certain audience. Maybe they were tired of being associated with being Black or Black pain or Black victimization, as they say. Maybe they believe blaming Black people made them sound more mature, more academic. If you've seen that, in the comments, I want you to put alignment in the chat, because that's what we're talking about tonight. Because I'm sure some of us have seen it. And let me tell you something about these alignments. I ain't just talking about, I'm specifically going to break down how it works in the Black community, but it happens everywhere. See, because the first alignment is a survival alignment. It's a survival alignment. And I'm going to show you all a survival alignment happens when people, right, they stay silent, they soften the truth, they move carefully because they want to protect themselves. They want to protect their income. They want to protect their position, their family, safety, access. A survival alignment, right, means continuing to exist under pressure. And it's not always based on betrayal. They're not always trying to betray you. It's simply them trying to survive and find a way. Maybe sometimes people, they don't speak because they're afraid of losing their job, their platform, their scholarship, their church position. Some silence is survival under systems that, because they'll be punished. And I want you to think about the Black father inside this alignment. He may work in a company, right? But if he speaks openly about race, it could cost him his advancement. So he's quiet. He may be in the military, law enforcement, government service, education, but he's careful. He might tell his children the truth at home, but soften himself in public because he knows his family depends on his income. That does not make him weak. It shows the pressure that fathers, Black fathers, have to carry when their honesty about what they see in the world may appear to be conflicting. In the chat, have you ever had to soften what you knew was true because you still had bills to pay, children to feed, a job to keep, people depending on you? That's survival alignment. And it's not a question of whether survival is not understandable. It is. But the deeper question is, what happens when survival becomes permanent silence? What happens when a whole community learns to whisper and keep things private, even when it's hurting them culturally? At that point, survival slowly becomes surrender, and people don't even notice anymore. We all start at the survival alignment. The second alignment is strategic alignment, right? Strategic alignment is easy to fall into. Strategic alignment happens when people work inside flawed systems because they believe gradual change is possible. We all can suffer from strategic alignment because it means planned, deliberate, and orientated ideas toward a goal. And at first, this alignment can be honorable when it's grounded in fact. A lot of Black fathers have worked inside churches, corporations, institutions, because they believe that access would become protection for their families and their community. They joined churches because they thought the church would be able to help them. They joined the military because they thought that they would be seen as respectable. Unions, universities, political systems. Every generation has had people who protested outside the system and people who tried to change the system from within. That's that strategic alignment. This matters because, see, fatherhood itself often requires strategy. A father cannot always fight every battle loudly. Sometimes he has to choose to fight. That keeps the family protected. That keeps the family well. Sometimes he has to think about timing. How does he leverage it? What is the evidence? How will it affect the money, the relationship? What are the consequences? Leveraging the power or the advantage that allows them as a family to influence an outcome. Many Black fathers have lived their whole lives calculating leverage because they knew anger without leverage could get them fired. And back in the day, arrested, isolated, or even murdered or killed. That's a hard truth. That's a hard fact. That's a historical fact. But it is the part of the historical psychology and legacy of Black fatherhood. Strategic alignment becomes dangerous when strategy becomes an excuse for endless compromise. And we see that. If a person keeps saying, I'm working from the inside, I'm not being affected by it, but I'm working from the inside, but that inside only changes them and they never change it, then the strategy has become absorption. Absorption has pulled them into a system so deeply that they use their ability to challenge it. Dick Gregory said, you've been in the stink for so long, you don't even smell it no more. And this is where you have to think carefully. When is working inside the system wise? And when does working inside the system become a way of protecting your own access and then using that to make your community suffer? That is the question I want you to answer. Put it in chat, put it in the comments. How do you know the difference between strategy and surrender? How do you know when a leader is navigating wisely? And how do you know when that leader has become so comfortable with the power that they have and they're using it against you? That's why these alignments, as I teach them, are so important. The third alignment, the opportunistic alignment. Opportunistic alignment happens when people gain money. You see this all the time. Attention, status, platforms, access to exclusive places. And the only thing they have to do is repeat narratives that harm their own people. Opportunity means an opening for gain. Opportunism happens when the game matters more than the facts. This is one of the most visible alignments in the modern media environment today. I ain't even got to name people. You automatically should be thinking about people who do it. The modern media environment causes outrage sales, anti-Black narrative sale, Black people blaming sales, Black people in front of audiences that already dislike Black people sell. A person can become more popular by saying that these are horrible fathers, they're criminals, in polished language. That create, even when they do it in front of a hostile audience, already wanting to believe the lie. That's where Black suffering and Black fatherhood becomes a commodity. Commodity means turning something into a product for exchange. The pain of Black families becomes content. The image of the failed Black fathers becomes a thumbnail. The wounded Black child becomes a talking point. The struggling Black mother becomes evidence that she's no good. The Black community becomes a stage where someone performs toughness obsequiously for people who do not actually want Black people healing or feeling good about themselves anyway. That is opportunistic alignment. It's not a critique. It's not an extraction. And let's make that very clear. Extraction means taking a value from something without repairing or replenishing what was taken. When people extract from Black pain, they use the pain for attention. They use it for profit, political approval. They brand people without doing the work of repair. They can talk about absent fathers, but never mentor children themselves. They can talk about Black crime, but never build institutions or visit those cities to try to help. They can talk about family values, but never support policies that stabilize families. They can talk about personal responsibility, but never accept responsibility themselves. They're not there to defend. Have you ever seen someone build a platform by humiliating Black people in front of people who already hate Black people? Have you ever seen someone become famous by saying, I'm just telling the truth about Black people, while the only truth they tell is the truth that blames the weakest people in the room, that attacks Black women, that attacks Black fathers, that attacks Black children and puts them in a situation where life becomes more dangerous and more hostile for them. This is opportunistic alignment. And we got to name it because it's one of the most dangerous. Because some people do not want solutions. They want a marketable enemy. They want to put something out here to make money. The other real dangerous alignment, the ideological alignment. Ideological alignment is so dangerous. It happens when the person no longer just performs the system's view, but actually believes the things that they're saying. It believes in that black failure. It believes in these horrible, illogical thoughts. Ideology refers to a structured set of beliefs that helps to shape how they interpret their reality. That's why it's dangerous. Once a person is ideologically aligned, they do not feel like they are repeating propaganda. They feel like they're telling you the facts. That is what makes it so dangerous and so powerful. The person has internalized the narrative. They believe it. They hold on to it. Their judgment, their expectations, everything is absorbed into it. And when a person internalizes anti-Black narratives, they may begin to see Black struggle as proof of Black inferiority, Black laziness, Black criminality, Black irresponsibility, Black cultural defect. They may look at Black fathers and see failure before they even say anything. They may look at Black poverty and see bad choices before they even look at what the society or what the community or the opportunity is. They will look at Black anger and see irrationality before they see historical hurt. They may look at Black calls for justice when something wrong happens and see excuses before they see evidence. This alignment is dangerous because the person often believes they have become independent. In other words, what they say, I do not think like the rest of you. I escaped the victim mentality. They could do better. I'm not afraid to tell you the truth about Black people. But sometimes what they call the fact is simply the system's old accusations spoken through a mouth that looks just like you and me. They believe they're free because they've separated themselves from the people who they look down on. They've taken survival and that they've turned it into an ideological belief. And they're bound to that worldview. And they will watch you die because they're so bound to that worldview. How many of you have seen someone confuse harshness with honesty? Have seen someone talk about Black people with contempt and call them evil or criminal, and then call that maturity, call themselves wise? Harsh is not always honest, but they don't see it that way because truth may be uncomfortable, but contempt is not the same as facts. They don't care because all they want to do is separate themselves. And they have in their minds. Fifth alignment, state alignment, happens when churches, civic groups, schools, nonprofits, right? The government groups. It happens when the state refers to the organized political and administrative power of government. However you look at it, people align themselves and say that these institutions, sorry, put the wrong one up here. These institutions, there it is. These institutions they can't fail. They mirror these groups. They mirror the government. The government is always right. The church is always right. And this doesn't mean that every church, every government program is bad. It just means institutions can become more concerned with compliance. My wife often we talk about this with compliance, funding, reputation, access. As long as I can keep my access and we can keep our reputation right, we're going to go along with what the state says, even if what the state says is wrong. It's what Dr. King talked about in the letter from Birmingham jail and telling white ministers that this is against the gospel of Christ. And what we're doing with Jim Crow. The alignment, state alignment matters deeply in Black history because Black institutions have often been survival structures. A survival structure is a place, a church, some place where you feel safe. Black churches, schools, mutual aid societies, fraternal orders, whatever. Even your barbershops, your beauty shops, as we talked about earlier. But if that institution starts to drift, this is something y'all need to get my wife's book. Institutional drift means a slow movement away from the original purpose. A church created to protect people can become more concerned with respectability than preaching the gospel or healing. A school created to liberate minds can become more concerned with compliance than teaching facts. A nonprofit created to serve families can be more concerned with how much money they get in grants than who they're actually helping to transform. And where Black fatherhood gets affected, if institutions serving Black families begin to mirror systems that already misread Black men, like the welfare system, fathers may enter these spaces already treated as a problem, as trouble. They may be spoken about as risks rather than resources. They may be managed instead of understood. They may be silenced instead of heard. They may be corrected without being restored or having anything resolved. They're going to be studied before they're ever loved. State alignment can turn community care into an administrative control. And I'm telling you, have any of you ever seen an institution that claimed to serve Black families but seemed more concerned about paperwork, reputation, funding, respectability than your actual welfare? Have you ever seen a church, school, or an organization avoid the hard facts of what you need because hard facts might threaten this relationship with the money and the power that it's looking for? That is the danger of state alignment. Institutions can forget they are created to protect. I promise you I'm almost done. The sixth alignment is performative. Performative alignment happens when a person turns critique, pain, religion, race, politics, right? They turn these things, the family struggle, into a public performance for applause. They want to be seen. They focus on outrage. They focus on algorithmic reward, likes, follows, shares. Performative doesn't have to be negative to begin with if it's something like comedy. But that's not what we're talking about. Performative means the action is done mainly to be seen, approved, shared, or praised or rewarded for tearing down others. And that alignment is everywhere in the digital age because platforms reward emotional intensity. They reward persons who say the sharpest and most nonsensical things. Doesn't care for facts. It rewards humiliation, conflict. And it does this with a certainty and a confidence more than care, study, or engagement. Doesn't matter if it's truthful. Algorithmic reward on digital platforms promote content that creates engagement. Engagement means likes and whatever. It doesn't matter if it's truthful or not. If anger keeps people watching, then the performer is going to throw anger. The platform will reward that anger. If humiliation keeps people commenting, the platform will reward that humiliation. If anti-Black talking points create debate, the platform will reward that talking point. That does not mean algorithm has personal hatred. It simply means that the system may amplify whatever keeps people emotionally activated. I saw this the other day when I posted that post from that lawyer on saying that Black people were culturally murderous. And white people started to, racist whites and bigoted whites started to comment and didn't even read what I wrote and saying that we're not criminally, we're not, that's not our cultural training. People can make clips turning children's pain into a debate material. I've seen videos of African kids playing around and eating dirt, but it's shared on these platforms. People could show family dysfunction to score political points, claim that this is how people actually are. And as I told you earlier in this program, isolate one specific thing to make it seem like it's the whole thing. Everyone says they care about the family, but the family becomes a stage. The father becomes a prop. The mother becomes a prop. The children become a prop. And when things go wrong, children become evidence. The mother becomes a target. The community becomes a spectacle. The public display that attracts attention is what performers are about, often by turning serious human realities into entertainment. When Black family pain becomes spectacle, healing becomes secondary. Racists start to believe what they see. People begin asking, will this go viral? Before they ask, will this help anybody? They begin designing arguments for reaction instead of restoration. And when the subject is Black fathers, this is especially harmful because many Black men already feel judged before they speak. If every public conversation about them becomes a performance and only points to criminality, raciality, some will retreat even deeper into silence. They will not speak on it. They will not counter it. This is why we don't see more historians and academics get out here to challenge these narratives. Do you think social media has made us better at healing family wounds, or has it made us better at performing them? When people argue about Black fathers online, do you usually see repair, or do you see people trying to fight, to criminalize, or trying to win views? See, that question matters because a community cannot heal if its pain becomes content strategy. And that's where we are. The seventh alignment is respectability alignment. This one really angers me because when people believe Black people can escape mistreatment mainly by behaving better, you've all heard it. Dressing better, speaking better, marrying better, working better, thinking better, proving that they one of the good ones. Respectability refers to the attempt to gain social protection by appearing morally acceptable to another class, culture, or society. There's nothing wrong with discipline, education, dignity, good speech. He speaks real well, or you talk white. Strong families. There's nothing wrong with responsible behavior or self-control. But when you add that moniker, like I just said, you speak white, you act white, there's a problem. Those things matter. The problem begins when respectability becomes a substitute or a code word for you just to be who you are. And then they substitute it for justice. And this alignment has a long history. Black communities have often used respectability strategically because survival, as we talked about earlier, sometimes requires careful public presentation, how I present myself, how I dress myself, how I look. Parents teach children how to dress, speak, walk, behave, and carry themselves because they know the world judges Black children harshly. They know it. That kind of instruction could be protective, and it's also proactive. Carry yourself a certain way when you're in this car. Don't speed. If the police stop you, this is what you say. Always be respectful. Always be respectful. But see, respectability becomes harmful when it teaches people that if Black people are mistreated, the main reason must be that they failed to present themselves properly, even when they did. This is where Black fathers carry a heavy burden. Many Black fathers teach respectability because they want their children to survive, to be safe. They tell sons to pull up their pants, watch their tone, speak carefully, stay calm, work hard, avoid trouble, go to school, never give people an excuse. These instructions come from love. But the father also knows something about it is pain. He knows that even when his son does everything right, the world could misread him and it could cost him his life. He knows respectability may reduce danger in some situations, but be seen as arrogance in others. And that it cannot eliminate anti-Blackness. Anti-Blackness, the idea that the belief, practices, and assumptions that devalue Black life, Black humanity, Black thought, Black culture, Black bodies, Black humanity. That's why respectability has to be handled with care. We do not mock older generations for teaching respectability because that's how they survived. Because many of them were trying to keep our children alive. Keep us alive. But we also cannot pretend respectability is liberation. A polished Black man can still be discriminated against. He can still have jobs held from him. He can still be seen as arrogant, pompous, narcissistic, simply because he wants to look decent. An educated Black father can still be treated as threatening. A veteran can still be ignored and treated as threatening. A homeowner can be redlined, and so you can't be in this neighborhood, no matter the fact of how well he dresses or how good he looks. A well-dressed child can still be followed in a store or chased out of a store. A respectable citizen can still have their vote suppressed. Yeah, good behavior matters, but good behavior does not dictate that you will survive an unjust system. And you got to be honest. Ask yourself, how many of you were raised with some version of do not give them a reason? How many of you understand that phrase that comes from love, but is also from fear? That is respectability alignment. And then some people take it to a whole nother level. They tell you that I'm respectable, you're not. And that certain people in the Black community are not. And you can take it from me because I'm Black like them. And this creates a very dangerous alignment, a very dangerous situation. We've named the 7 alignments because a friend of mine really wanted me to break them down, and I did tonight. Survival, strategic, opportunistic, ideological, state, performative, and respectability. All of them can work together. Each one operates differently, though. But they all can work together. The question is not whether every person in these alignments is evil. That's not the question. This would be too simple. The better question is what each alignment does to facts, to truth. Does it protect? Does it soften facts? Does it push or sell facts? Does it fragment facts? Are you performing lies? Are you replacing truth? And then when Black fatherhood enters that alignment, what happens to the father? Let me go even further, though we're talking about the Black father. When it enters the alignment with the mother, what happens to her? to the children? Are they understood to be human beings? Are they used as evidence? Are they used as a profit scheme? Are they trying to be restored? Is somebody trying to help them? Or are they turning them into a symbol of failure? Wounds are marketed. People are victimized. Which alignment do you see most often today? Of the ones I mentioned, do you see survival? Do you see opportunistic? Which ones do you see? I bet you see all of them. If you were honest, you may be more affected by one or two. But if we're honest, we see all of them. But I ask you, put it in the chat, put it in the comments, the alignments that you most see. This matters because alignments do not shape. They do not only shape public debates, they shape family memory. They shape how children hear adults talk about Black people, Black men, Black women. They shape how fathers understand their own worth. They shape how mothers talk about the fathers. They shape how churches and ministers, how they talk about the families. They shape how schools interpret Black people. They shape how media describes neighborhoods, Black neighborhoods. They shape how voters think about policies for Black people. They shape how people decide whether a wound deserves compassion or condemnation. When the alignment is unhealthy, when it is foul, when it is a sellout alignment, the father becomes smaller than the stereotype attached to him. He becomes the problem. He becomes the absent one. The mother becomes the whore. The mother becomes the welfare queen, the criminal, the irresponsible one. The children become criminalized. The reason the community struggles. But when historical memory is restored, when we actually see everything and not go back to that looking at that little small iota of a problem and expanding that little small problem to be the whole issue, when we open it up, the situation becomes visible again in its full complexity. We can hold things accountable without being dehumanizing folks. We can be corrected without being caricatured. We can talk about things in honesty. We can challenge without being used as a weapon against our own people. We can be invited into healing without being told that the conversation is going to become propaganda. If we're serious, if we really look at these things, we can do better. We can do better as a people. Those sellout alignments affect all of us in all areas because they shape how the community tells the story under pressure. We got to ask which voices are teaching our children how to interpret Black femininity and Black manhood. We have to ask whether these voices love our people, study our history, tell the truth proportionately, and seek to repair or to help us, or are they there to tear us down? And we got to call it out when we see it. When you hear someone talk about Black fathers, Black families, Black mothers, Black fathers, ask yourself, what alignment is speaking? Is it survival? Is it strategy? Is it opportunity? Is it ideology? Is it performative? Is it the state? Is it respectability? Is it a fact rooted in love, history, accountability, and repair? Or is it simply something being used to tear us down? Because once you can identify the alignment, we can stop being manipulated by the narrative. And once we stop being manipulated by the narrative, we can finally return to the real work of healing families, healing communities, restoring memory, correcting lies, holding people accountable without destroying them, and refusing to let anyone turn Black people into a tool for shame. I kept you all here for an hour and 30 minutes. And I thank you all, those who came in and those who watch it later. I want you to bring this back, this to you. And I want this to touch your heart, at the heart of the matter. This episode is not about pretending every father has done right. It was not about excusing men who wounded their children, abandoned responsibility, or left families carrying pain that they should have never had to carry. Truth does not require denial, but truth also does not allow us to take Black fathers, mothers, Black families, children, and Black history and cut it into fragments and let pundits, platforms, politicians, and performers tell us what the fragments mean toward the whole story of Black people. I hope you got the deeper questions tonight. Who benefits when Black families are reduced to these narratives? When Black fathers are reduced to absence? Who benefits when Black family wounds are separated from the realities that created them? Slavery, Jim Crow, labor exclusions, housing discrimination, civil rights, incarceration, media distortion, and on and on and on. It is an unfinished struggle for the enforcement of freedom. Remember, General Order 3 told you you're free, but you had to stay. It's not a full freedom. Who benefits when personal responsibility is preached only downward to families, but not upward to systems, institutions, the lawmakers, when media voices aren't held accountable, when power structures aren't held accountable? Answer it for yourself. What did your father or your father figures give you that deserves to be remembered? What did your father fail to give you that needs to be remembered and healed? We're not perfect. What are you passing down to your children, your nieces, nephews, students, grandchildren, and community? And what are you refusing to pass down anymore? What have you decided that you're not going to allow to become a generational curse anymore? Because, see, we talked about the forgotten good father. He was never truly missing. Many were working, they were surviving, they were praying, they were correcting. They were there. They were imperfect, they were wounded, but they were there, trying to love with a language that were never fully, they themselves may have never been fully taught. And some fathers did fail, but we cannot let failure become the only story. And we cannot let stereotypes become our historical facts. So my call to action tonight, before I get off of here, go learn your family history. Asking the elder a question before that memory leaves this world. Remember what I told you about the Sasha and the Zumani. Ask those questions and learn. And do not let anyone make you ashamed of seeking the full facts. We all the fathers out there of every culture, that's for all of you, not just the Black ones. Go learn. If this episode helped you, subscribe to the Erudition Network. Share this live and send it to a father, a son, a teacher, a mentor, someone who will benefit from it. We need a full conversation on this, and we need to have further conversation on this. We're not here to chase outrage. We're not talking heads. We're here to grow knowledge and understanding. If you want to go deeper, you can go out online. I will put it in the chat. My wife's book, my last book. We have books that are on Amazon. They're built to help you and to help you to learn and to grow your knowledge. We want you to do that. It's critical. And critical thinking and questions, they need to be pushed in our family and our teachers and our world. I want to thank you for spending this Father's Day special episode with me. I honor all of you who did that. All you fathers who show up to watch or watch it later, who heal from the ones who did not. I just want us to heal. I want us to do better. If we haven't done better, we can all heal. We can all become better. Become the memory your children can trust. Become the memory your children can trust. And remember this, the strongest legacy is not only what people say about us after we are gone, it's what becomes possible for others because we were here, because we left something worthwhile. You all be blessed. I thank you so much. I saw you, Dustin, in here. Thank you for jumping in the chat. I'm glad I was able to get back. This is Eddie K. Phillips. from the Erudition Network. You guys keep studying, keep questioning, keep learning. Join us. Hope God willing, I will be back here next week. I feel like I dropped out of my chair doing this episode, but thank you all. You all be blessed. And remember, Erudition is here to grow knowledge and understanding. Be blessed. Thank you.
From Eddie K. Phillips, founder of the Erudition Network, comes 101 Black History Questions, a groundbreaking book that challenges what you thought you knew and uncovers the stories history tried to hide. Perfect for classrooms, families, and curious minds. Get the digital copy today on Amazon.